Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are about to enter Week 3 of the high school football season. Week 2 is in the books. For some people, there was not a chapter. We will get to that. We'll get to the games that were played, and we will look ahead to what's in store for some teams that have a bye this week. Either intentional or unintentional. We will talk about teams that are closing non-district play to get ready for district action as early as next week. And lots of other things going on in the world of high school football as well. And we will talk, I guess, first off the top. I mentioned it last week. By the time you hear this, at whatever point you do listen to it, there is a chance that games have been called off. And last week we did have one game that was straight up canceled. And we also had a game that was canceled, and then one of the opponents was able to find a replacement game. So they were able to play. So, of course, we're talking about Tom Bean was the team that had to cancel their game going to Prairieland for their matchup. The Tom Bean ISD wanted to use the Labor Day weekend as a pause. They've had not only dealing with COVID-19, but also I guess there was sort of a stomach bug sickness situation that was going through the ISD, mainly at the lower levels, but obviously you have multifamily households and you could have kids from the same house going into different school buildings. So they closed the campus after Thursday and restarted up on Tuesday, and they wanted to use that gap to sort of get some people healthy, calm some things down. So that game did not get played for Tom Bean. The plan, as of right now, again as I'm talking to you, is they're going to play this week, and we'll preview that game when we run down the list. And then Bells and Howe made a decision about their game late Thursday afternoon. Howe was the one to cancel that one because of COVID-19 concerns within their program. That was more of what it sounded like to be a positional situation where they would not have enough players at that position to be able to play the game and not have it be a safety sort of issue. And so Howe canceled their game against Bells. They are still scheduled, again, as of right now, to play this week. So we will see how things go with them, and depending on how things either progressed in a negative way, or if there was some positive from this Labor Day weekend, the kids were able to hopefully stay away from each other, not have any more positive tests or whatever. So we'll see about those two programs. And Bells was able to scramble and find somebody at the relatively last minute, and they were able to stay on track and play a game and hopefully get in their full season. So I said it going back to the preseason. Teams are going to have games get canceled. It was only going to be a matter of time before it affected some of our teams. It took 2 weeks to get to that point. Games are getting canceled. Every week. It's probably about the same number. If not, it increases a little bit. And people are just, if your game gets canceled and it's not your fault, you're just finding a replacement player, a replacement team, just so you can play. Unfortunately, we'll talk about a team right now that is having some trouble doing that. But I think people are making the best of the situation that they can. It's unfortunate. Again, we talked about it last year. When some teams had to miss either one game or multiple games, you feel bad for seniors. There's I think it's Mount Enterprise, which is located between, I think it's halfway between Longview and Lufkin is probably the best way to describe where they are. They've had for their first 3 games canceled of the season, and I believe one was not their fault, but they just couldn't find a replacement. And then I think they shut down their ISD in the meantime for situations once it got to their campus. So that's the extreme version of what teams have gone through. There hasn't been a whole lot of people that have had to do that. But Mount Enterprise, is 0 for 3. They're not going to be back until classes next week, and that's not a guarantee. So you feel bad for seniors at Tom Bean and how whether there's only a couple seniors or you have a big senior class, you don't want to see them lose. Every game you lose is 10% of your final season for those guys. So hopefully things will get cleared up and they can be back on schedule. So to get that out of the way, hopefully, like I said, if you whenever you listen to this, there is a chance that you may be hearing about a game that in the meantime has been canceled or has been changed or teams playing somebody else. And unfortunately, I cannot control that because, like I said, the decisions that were made last week came the day after this was even posted, let alone recorded. So, teams have been making changes on Fridays about their games that night. So it's just the lay of the land as we go forward and try to make this thing work. So, but we do have a relatively light slate as of right now. There are some teams that are on byes this week. Byes are really going to start playing a factor into the schedule. And like I said, if some other games get canceled, this will winnow down a little bit more. But unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to be the case. So I will preview them just in case they are on track to happen on Friday night. So obviously the best place to start is probably the game of the week from last week. Didn't know how it was going to turn out because obviously this was a game that Sherman lost last year. And they're coming off a loss in the Battle of the Axe, like they have done. So you never really know how a team's going to respond. And the Bearcats responded in a big way with a last-second Hail Mary to beat Mount Pleasant on the road, 36-35. So I'm sure that was a great late-night return back to Grayson County after pulling that game out. This was a game where the Bearcats were down by 2 scores. In the middle of the fourth quarter, they were down 35-24, with 4:54 left after Mount Pleasant scores, to make that the lead. And then Sherman was able to score on their next possession, but they still had to stop Mount Pleasant. They were able to do that. They were able to make a 4th down stop deep in their territory. But they still had to go 87 yards in a minute with no timeouts, and they were able to do that on a 48-yard Hail Mary to the end zone from Phoenix Grant to Elijah Chapman. No time on the clock. That was the ball game. If that is incomplete, that is a 35-30 Mount Pleasant win. Instead, Sherman evens its record at 1-1. And the story of this game, in terms of, again, the offense done, that was Phoenix Grant. He had a hand in all 5 of the touchdowns. He was 16 of 33 passing for 248 yards with 2 touchdowns. Obviously, a monster one at the end, the game winner. Did have an interception, and he also was the leading rusher with 22 carries for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chapman had 4 catches for 93 yards and the big TD. J.D. Parker had a big game, 4 catches for 75 yards and a TD as well. Dane Castleberry kicked a field goal for 37 yards, which obviously is not a gimme by any means in the high school level. And that was in the second quarter, but that was obviously a huge kick to make because it made things a little more manageable. Gave Sherman a chance to stay in it the rest of the way. They did give up a ton of rushing yards. Mount Pleasant ran for almost 400 yards. That is their offense. Their offense is predicated on the triple option and the option game. So they kind of knew that coming in. And this was a back and forth game. This was 7-7 after the first quarter. It was 17-14 Sherman at halftime. Both teams scored touchdowns in the third quarter. So it was 24-21 going to the fourth quarter. It it was everybody. It was close the whole way through, and Sherman was able to pull that out. That's obviously Corey Kane's first win, not only at Sherman but as a head coach in general. That's a pretty wild way to get a first win, and Sherman's obviously going to look to build on that. They're going to go to Saginaw in a game that I will be at covering, so I'll be able to watch Sherman at 1-1 take on 1-1 Saginaw. Saginaw lost last week 62-21 against Frisco Heritage. I did this game last year as well when it was at Bearcat Stadium. It was not close last year. It was 62-0 Sherman. And I have a feeling that it may be somewhere in that neighborhood again this year, just because I think you have the obviously positive momentum. I know we talked about it last week that the Bearcats, they did not win the Battle of the Axe, but I think they saw that they were better competitively in a lot of areas than I think the unknown of having a new coach, having some the new skill guys and a new quarterback, having a lot of new faces on defense. I think a lot of those questions were semi-answered or answered, even if though it was a loss. Obviously, Denison's a really good team. We'll talk about them here in a second, and what they're going to be up to in the next couple weeks. And so I think that was a decent enough springboard, and then to have this win with all that momentum, like I said, this was a game that Sherman lost 24-7 last year, and to turn that around and come away with a win, a dramatic win. Guys had to make plays on both sides of the ball down the stretch. Sherman forced 4 turnovers. So I think they're putting the pieces together, and this game against Saginaw I think is gonna continue that momentum. And like I said, the game last year was not competitive at all. Last year it was a much needed win because Sherman was 0-2. You only have a couple more games left until getting into district play, and it was sort of that release of, oh, thank God, we aren't as bad as we think it looks, because we haven't played well and we're 0-2 and everything came together in this game against Saginaw last year. That obviously the defense pitched a shutout. It was the program's biggest victory in almost 15, 16 years. It was everybody needed that win. The offense put up, there was a special teams touchdown in there, so the offense put up 50 points. It was what you wanted to see from a team that needed a confidence boost, and I don't think this team needs the confidence boost. I think this group going out this week against Saginaw is gonna say, okay, let's get 2 in a row, let's get on a roll, let's keep this positive momentum going, as opposed to we just need to get a win any way we can get it, then it turned out to be a blowout. So I'm interested to see, because I did do the Sherman Denison game to open the season, and to have this couple week gap with a game in between to see how they look as they get more comfortable under, like I said, Coach Kane and a new coaching staff, be a little more familiar with everything. I'm interested to see how things look going forward. If there is one thing to really look at, which will be interesting, is Sherman's running game has not exactly been stellar, especially from a yards per carry standpoint. Grant has been the leading rusher in both games. And when you're not really when that's not what you want your offense to be, to have the quarterback be that focal point, I think they need somebody to step into a lead role, and I don't think anybody's done that yet. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe this is a game where you can get somebody a majority of the carries. This is a game you shouldn't have to rely on Phoenix Grant to get over 20 carries. In addition to throwing it, he had essentially 55 plays last week. He threw it 33 times and he ran 22 times, and that's entirely too much of both at the same time. You can have one or the other, but when when you're putting it all on one guy's shoulders, that it can be really tough to win that way. So I think that's going to be interesting not just this week, but the next couple of weeks, to see if Sherman can find that consistent running game outside of what Grant can give you from the quarterback spot as they get ready for district play. So we'll see what happens when Sherman goes to Saginaw on Friday. And that is a 7 o'clock kick. I know I've mentioned I would say that when that happens. This is the only 7 o'clock game. I'm almost certain it's the only 7 o'clock game for Sherman this year. Everything else is a 7:30 start. But Saginaw has the home field, so they get to decide on the starting point. And it's probably better this week. I mean, it's not that it's bad for distance, but it is gonna make you get home a half an hour earlier. Being at 7:00 and having to, it's about an hour and a half from here, so that's a nice little thing to have it start at 7 instead of 7:30 on Friday. I mentioned Denison. They do not play this week. They are one of the teams that has a bye. They are coming off a 42-21 victory over Fort Worth Brewer, and this was a game that was not very close. Denison was up 21-0 10 minutes into the game. They were up 28-0 in the middle of the second quarter before Brewer got on the board, and they were up 42-7 early in the fourth quarter before Brewer got a kickoff return and then scored a little bit later to make it look a lot better than 42-21. But it was there's 11 minutes to go in the game, and it's 42-7. A lot of big plays for Denison. Right off the bat, Jadarian Price had an 85-yard touchdown run. He also caught a 52-yard touchdown pass from Caleb Hevner. Hevner also had a 29-yard touchdown run. Some long catches. Trey Rhodes had one for 27 yards. Keegan Pruitt had one for 34 yards. A lot of big plays in this one early on as Denison broke things open, and Brewer was never able to really get anything going until the game was out of hand. So Denison's 2-0. They're on their bye. The rest of their district starts district play this week, 7-5A Division II. So they're gonna hang out. One thing to note this week in the Dave Campbell's / Associated Press rankings, Denison moved into the top 10 in 5A Division II. They moved in at number 9. I think a lot of people think very highly of Brewer based on some of the guys that they have on their roster. And I think obviously you've got a senior-laden team that has beaten two. Obviously you beat your rival by multiple touchdowns. You win this game by multiple touchdowns, and like I said, that wasn't really close. And it does set up a ranked matchup, assuming that Lovejoy does not lose this week, and I don't believe that they will, because they are playing Princeton, who I don't think is going to be able to match Lovejoy's firepower. And so if assuming everything stays the way it is, you would have number 3 Lovejoy hosting number 9 Denison for the first big showdown in District 7 5A Division 2. So, and the rankings are nice, and that's great, and all that stuff, and it wouldn't matter if Denison was not ranked this week. They would still be going to Lovejoy, trying to knock them off to try to, make a statement, because Denison has never beaten Lovejoy, and we'll talk about that next week. But because they are the defending district champs, if you want to get that spot, you're going to have to knock them off. And I think the 3 best teams in the district, and we haven't seen anything otherwise since the first couple games, it's Lovejoy, Denison, and Frisco, whatever order you want to put them in. I think Frisco Liberty is lurking as a potential dark horse upset spoiler type of team. I think they're good enough to make the playoffs anyway, but to crack that top 3, I feel like they need to beat one of those 3 before I can throw them in that mix, just because they haven't done it yet. But I think those are the top 3, and 2 of them are going to play next week, and it's going to get a little more of a pop because it'll be, number 3 versus number 9, or number 2 versus number 9, or number 7, depending on if some of the teams in front of Denison lose and they decide to move them up. But at worst, if things stay the same, it'll be number 3 versus number 9. And you have an offense that's playing really well. Like I said, they put up 21 points in the first quarter. The balance is there. They almost had, if it wasn't for some bad snaps on some bad snaps that led to lost yardage, Denison would have had over 300 yards rushing for the second straight week. They would have been pushing 500 yards for the second straight week, even despite that. And this was a game they didn't run a lot of plays, because they only ran 47 plays, which is not a lot today. And the reason they only ran 47 plays was because of all those big plays. When when you have Jadarian Price, who finishes the game with 12 carries for 151 yards, and his touchdown is 85 yards on the first play, you only get one play and 85 yards out of it instead of going the length of the field in 10 plays, 12 plays, 14. I mean, there was not a lot of time spent on the field to pick up yards, and so but there still is that balance there. Hefner was 7 of 12 for 169 yards and a touchdown. He had 6 carries for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jack Allman again as in that secondary role. He had 5 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown, filling in that Asa Osborne role as the 1B to Price's 1A. It may be a little more pronounced that this year it's a 1 and a 2, but the 2 so far is averaging almost double digits. He's averaging double-digit yards a carry, and he's got 3 touchdowns in 2 games. So that's a nice second option for giving giving your main guy a breather when he needs it, or in a game like this where, like I said, it gets out of hand and you can turn it over to some other guys. And like I said, the defense was really good. They gave up a receiver screen early. It was Coach Whitson really didn't have he wasn't really upset about that because Dennison brought the house. It was a perfect play call at the right time. There was nobody there to make a play because everybody was rushing the quarterback. And if it was a different play call, he was going to get snowed under by about 3 jackets. But it was a perfect play call. They got beat on it. And outside of that, the first team defense really didn't give up a whole lot. The kickoff return was something he was more upset about because there were starter guys on that unit, and they were burned for that, and it was 73. It wasn't like it was an onside kick, some sort of fluky bounce, and the guy was wide open and could run it back for an easy score. And then the one late, was not really against the starters. There were I think a couple in there, but all in all, they've been really good through the first 2 games. Especially defensively, they gave up 13 points, and then if you take away, they've given up 2 touchdowns in each game because you take away, the kickoff returns not on the defense. But even if you count the second one, if you can count on your defense to hold people to 2 touchdowns a game, you're doing really well, and you get a chance to win, especially when your offense is averaging 40 points a game. So we'll see what Dennison has in store for Lovejoy in 2 weeks, but they are off this week with their bye, and then they get into district play where things are really going to ramp up in 2 weeks for them. Next game on the schedule is Van Alstyne hosting Anna. This is a matchup of 2-0 teams. Anna's coming off a 39-27 win against Hershey, and Van Alstyne had another lopsided victory. They won 48-7 against Bonham. We talked about last week that they've had really good success against Bonham, and that continued. They really blew things open in the third quarter. It was 28-7 at halftime, and then obviously Bonham never scored again. And then in the third quarter, by the middle of the third quarter, Van Alstyne had 3 more touchdowns and put that game away. Relatively simple, and the one play, the one touchdown that Bonham had, was an 80-yard pass on like a little post pattern type deal, and the guy took it to the house. You take that out, and Bonham really struggled. They averaged barely 2 yards a carry, maybe 2.5 if you're being generous. And then they threw for 172 yards, and 80 of it came on that one pass. So they had Van Alstyne forced 5 turnovers. One of those, Cade Milroy returned 27 yards for an interception. The interception return for a touchdown. So the defense got in on the action, and then offensively, Van Alstyne ran for 352 yards. Jaden Mahan led the way, had 24 carries for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he did. It was only just the two. Gavin Montgomery had 9 carries for 104 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also threw a 57-yard touchdown pass to Gavin Bybee. So it was pretty much a cruise control game. And Van Alstyne, so they're sitting here 2-0. They've got a chance to go 3-0 for the first time since 2015. Whoever wins this game gets their 3rd win, and that matches their win total from last season. So both these teams are playing well, playing confidently. This was a game I did last year because of the staggered schedule. So I did this game last year, and it came down to the end. Anna was actually up pretty big. Van Alstyne fought back, and they ended up losing 38-36. They had to go for it, 2-point conversion to tie the game, potentially send it to overtime in the 4th quarter. They got stopped, and Anna was able to hang on and win in the closing. I think it was the closing seconds actually. It was definitely like the last minute. So this should be a close game. Anna's won the last 5, but like I said, last year was competitive, and I think Van Alstyne's probably feeling a little bit better about themselves. This year for sure. Last year they came off that loss to Gunner. They bounced back against Bonham, and then they lost to Anna. It was kind of back and forth, so they're on a bit of a roll. They've got the home field. I don't know if that means much because Anna's right down the road. But I think this should be a good game. Anna's got a new head coach, so that's obviously something you kind of have to. You're probably not going to see potentially maybe a lot of the same things you have seen from Anna, because the previous coach was there for a long enough time that you could kind of establish that you have a new guy in charge to try to learn his tendencies and what he's like to do in the last couple games. But if Van Alstyne gets this win, like I said, they're 3-0. They went 3-8 last year. So you're off to a really good start, and a chance to continue to build on that going into again what's going to be a really good. It's going to be a really good district. I mentioned it last week. And if you just look at it through. You look at it through 2 games now. I'll pull up the standings. Everybody is 2-0 except for Sanger, who's 1-1. So you've got 4 teams that are 2-0, and Sanger's coming off a loss last week by 11 to a 5A team. I think Lake Worth is 5A now. So they were punching above their weight. We'll see how things shake out. But everybody's off to a good start in that district, so you want to kind of keep pace to kind of show that, hey, we're in this mix too for sure. So that's going to be Van Alstyne hosting Anna on Friday night. The next game, all local matchup as we work our way down into the 3As. Gunner is going to Whitesboro, and this is 2-0 Gunner against 1-1 Whitesboro. Gunner won an all local matchup last week. 51-7 against Pottsboro, and Whitesboro's coming off a loss 49-14 against one of Van Alstyne's district mates in Aubrey. This was a game that was not close last year. It was 42-10 Gunner, and the way that Gunner is off to their start this year, they won their first game 43-7 against Sunnyvale, and then 51-7 last week, where the game was 51-0 at halftime, and Pottsboro broke the shutout attempt in the final seconds with their touchdown. So, Gunner's doing Gunner things. It was 29-0 after the first quarter. A lot of people, getting involved. That's, typically the Gunner way. It is not. It's not always one guy doing the job. Ethan Sloan had 7 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown. Hudson Graham had 7 carries for 115 yards. And 2 touchdowns. He only threw for 65 yards. Was 7 of 14. One of those was a touchdown pass to Ivy Hellman. And then you throw in, Ashton Bennett had a touchdown run. Saul Rodriguez had a touchdown run. Caden Rigsby had a touchdown run. So the usual suspects for Gunner, but then you look and nobody had more than 8 carries. And yet Gunner goes for 407 yards. They only needed 35 carries to do that, and they did, and they even had 2 turnovers. So it's just one of those deals with them. They're a monster. Defensively, they held Pottsboro to 169 yards. They forced 3 turnovers themselves. So that's just one of those deals where Gunner's hot, and Whitesboro's going to have to deal with them. I know everybody's maybe looking ahead to next week because of Gunner playing Pilot Point. Pilot Point is if they continue to do what they're doing, there's a chance that's we have a ranked 3A Division II opponent against a ranked 3A Division I opponent. So I know a lot of people are excited about the potential of that next week. But Gunner has to beat Whitesboro first, and I think they feel pretty good with the start that they're off to on both sides of the ball. Whitesboro, we mentioned, obviously they opened the season, they won that game in overtime against Bells. Dropped back to earth a little bit this week. Part of that was Matt Harper, the quarterback, got hurt and did not return. So it was 13-7. Aubrey was ahead after the first quarter, and it was 29-14 at halftime. So that's you're within 2 scores. But unfortunately, like I said, so Harper goes out, and then things kind of got away from Whitesboro after that. Aubrey scored 3 times in the second half to pull away for that 49-14 score. Whitesboro finished with only 132 yards. They had 3 turnovers. Grayson Ledbetter was the bright spot. Second straight week over 130 yards. He had 14 carries, 131 yards, and he scored both touchdowns. And so obviously the biggest question for Whitesboro is will Mac Harper make an appearance this week? I guess it's 50. I don't want to say it's 50-50. I haven't talked to anybody as of this recording. I would like to think that they would probably err on the side of caution. They do have the bye next week, and then they open district play the week after that. So if it's a more than basic injury, we kept him out the rest of this game because it was a precaution, he's fine, then I could see them going with him this week. But if it's anything where you could make it worse, hey, if it does get worse, do we have, why are we risking it in a game, especially with a bye week the next week? He could have 3 weeks to get fully healthy depending on the severity of his injury. So if he doesn't play, Clay Hermes was the guy who took his place. So he would be getting the start. That's not exactly an ideal position for a backup to be making a start against, if not the best team in 3A Division II, one of the best teams. But that may be the situation that Whitesboro faces in facing Gunner at Whitesboro on Friday night. We did mention Pottsboro as part of that. They have a bye this week as well. This is an unintended bye, unfortunately. Before the season started, they had this is the week that they played Melissa last year. Both schools, after that game took place in the offseason, decided that it would be better for them to not play again this year. And Pottsboro has its regular bye if it was playing this week in week 4, because they will start district that following week. They have not been able to find an opponent. I know they are looking. They're trying to find a good matchup where they don't, it's close to them in size. They don't have to travel halfway across the state to find somebody. They're also looking to find somebody for next week in week 4. They don't mind that because they would have essentially their bye this week. So hopefully, so by the time you hear this, Pottsboro may have an opponent, and we may be in the same situation next week. Although if we get past this week, they may just say, okay, we're just gonna play one less game. It was unfortunate that they weren't able to find an immediate replacement. But hopefully, the way things have gone this year or so far through a couple weeks, games are getting changed all the time, and people are looking for opponents. So hopefully, they're able to find the right match and they can get a game in. But as of recording this, Pottsboro is on their bye, and they're in a. I think that obviously the number one thing is that I think they want to play, because they're 0-2. It's the first time since 2009 that Pottsboro has started 0-2, We mentioned the score against Gunner. It was 51-7. They didn't do a whole heck of a lot until the latter stages of the game, and I think they want to get out there and improve and show that they're better, and maybe get some momentum going into that bye week before they open district against Howe. They lost that first game in a shootout, and then this game, they struggled offensively. Community scored 56 points on them in the opener. Gunner scored 51 points this week. So obviously, defense is a focus for Pottsboro if they don't end up playing for the next couple of weeks. Maybe maybe the gap is a good thing to try to find some new scheme adjustments, to try to find some new guys at some new positions, just to see how that looks, and you've got some time to get guys acclimated. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back, especially if they don't get a chance to play. But I'm sure they want to play. Like I mentioned, you want your seniors to have as many games as possible. So we'll see what Pottsboro can do in terms of finding an opponent, either this week, week 3, or if they can find somebody in week 4. If they don't find anybody, they're going to open district play with Howe. Hopefully Howe is back this week, like we mentioned at the top. They have the COVID-19 protocol situation in place where they did not play this past week against Bells. They're supposed to go to Sanger. So that would be 0-1 Howe against 1-1 Sanger. This was a game Sanger won last year 35-8. And the biggest thing about this is can Howe play? Because they would be in a worse boat when it comes to getting ready for district, because they could go basically a month without playing because they didn't play last week. They're not gonna, if they don't play this week and then they have a bye week, they're literally going to go 4 weeks without having a game. So I'm assuming they want to play. I don't know, and I haven't talked to Coach Jelling or not. If this week doesn't happen, and this may be something he doesn't know until they know for sure that they're not playing this week, they may try to find somebody next week just to get back in the swing of things. Of course, there's people who say, well, why would you want to do that in case people get injured, and then you don't have them for the district games, the games that really count. And that, for Howe, is a legitimate concern. Last year we talked about in the preseason podcast, injuries are what killed Howe last year. They lost a ton of guys. Every week it was different guys. Guys come back, more guys get hurt. It was a revolving door at a lot of spots. And they opened against Callisburg. It was a better effort. We talked about that. It was a close game going to the fourth quarter, as compared to the first year that it wasn't close at all to open 2020. And I think Howe wanted to see, okay, where are we against Bells last week? Where are we against Sanger this week? And gear up for being a lot more competitive in that district. So we'll see if Howe is going to be able to play either this week or next week, depending on how things shake out. But if they do play, they would be playing at Sanger on Friday night. The next matchup, as we work our way down, is going to be SNS at Alvord. This is 0-2 SNS at 1-1 Alvord. Last week, SNS lost 36-10 against Callisburg, and Alvord lost 56-12 against Peaster. This was a game last year that was supposed to be played in this week, and Alvord canceled because they had too many positive cases, and SNS just took the extra bye week instead of finding a replacement. If I remember correctly, it was like Wednesday night-ish when they found out that they weren't going to play Alvord last year, and they just decided it was too late in the week, and they didn't really want to play somebody without being able to scheme for them. And at that point, SNS was coming off back-to-back shutouts to open up the season. They were 2-0, feeling good. They felt this was a chance for them to get a win, and we'll see. So we'll see how this goes. Alvord is in that district with Tom Bean, Collinsville, Tioga. They finished second last year, but they are coming off a lopsided loss against Peaster. And so this is going to be an interesting game. SNS obviously looking for their first win. 0-2. Obviously it's totally flipped from what they did last year. They fell behind 24-7 at halftime last week. Gavin Collins had the lone touchdown, and then Kevin Sanchez kicked a field goal in the fourth quarter. But by that point, the game was out of reach. And I guess the one thing, it's been kind of a mixed bag. They scored 28 points in the first game, but they gave up 64. So obviously, if you're looking at this game, obviously that this is an improvement. You almost cut that number in half if you're SNS, but then the offense really struggled to get going in this one for SNS. So it's gonna be. I think this is a good maybe palate cleanser, so to speak. I think opening against Chisholm, I think that's them sort of playing up a little bit in terms of size and everything like that. And the Calsburg game last year, they only won that one 14-0. So I think they kind of knew they were going to have to find a way to get some stuff done offensively, because not that they struggled last year, but obviously they only had the two touchdowns. So it wasn't like they blew them out last year. So this is a nice little test for SNS. Obviously, you want to get that win in there somewhere. You want to build a little confidence before district play, and they're gonna be running out of chances here in a little bit. So they've sort of got to pick it up here the next couple weeks to kind of get some of that momentum going. And what's going to be a really, I think, another crowded district, another down to the wire race. And I think they were the surprise team last year, and I think some people, obviously everybody's gunning for them this time around, as opposed to thinking they were going to be an easy win. So getting some things together for them would be really good here, and they could start to do that with a trip to Alvord on Friday night. Elsewhere in District 8 3A teams, next game on the schedule is Celeste coming to Whitewright. Whitewright is going to try and bounce back. They are 1-1 after they lost 20-7 against Honeygrove, and Celeste did not play. They are 0-1. They had their game last week against Cumbie canceled by Cumbie, and they were unable to find a replacement game in time. So that obviously makes this matchup a little interesting. There's not a lot of data for this. Whitewright won this game last year 20-7, and they've had the upper hand lately in this series. But obviously Celeste did not play last week, so we don't have a real good gauge of where they're at coming into this matchup. Whitewright is coming off a loss. This was the game against Honeygrove last year was a game that they won, and not only that, they have a quarterback injury. Caden Caraway got hurt, and so obviously the question is going to be how do you handle having a guy at a key spot, and not just on offense but on defense. He was an all-state guy as a safety based on his playmaking ability, picking off passes, that sort of thing last year. So that's a double whammy for Whitewright's lineup. Clayton Warford was the backup. Now he's the starter. He had 10 carries for 42 yards. Scored the lone touchdown with a run in the second quarter that tied the game at 7. But then Honeygrove scored twice in the fourth quarter to not only pull that game out, but end up putting it away, making it a 2-score game. And Whitewright wasn't able to answer. Warford only threw for 45 yards. Was 6 of 13 with 2 interceptions. Zane Prieto was the leading receiver, had 2 catches for 33 yards. Zyron Daniels had 8 carries for 43 yards. Totally different flip from opening with a 49-0 victory. Obviously part of that is you're losing your best weapon. In that victory, in the opening victory, Caraway throws for 4 touchdowns. Runs for over 100 yards. He's your guy, seasoned veteran, senior year, and that happens, and it's unfortunate for anybody, but we'll see what Whitewright can do as they look to bounce back and try to figure out how they're going to attack things going forward with district play coming around the corner for them. And then the last team in the district, Bells. They will be going to Valley View this week. It is 1-1 Bells against 0-1 Valley View. Here we have two teams that were affected by. I'm sorry, Valley View was not. Valley View took their bye. So Valley View didn't play last week because of their bye. Why it was week 2, I don't know. So they're gonna play 9 straight games going into for the rest of the season. They lost to Ponder 47-26 in the season opener. Bells, like we mentioned at the top, supposed to play against Howe. Would have been a nice little road trip, just minutes away. Unfortunately, Howe cancels, and in finding another game, they end up going to Breckenridge, which is on the other side of Fort Worth. But if you're going to make that trip, you might as well make it a happy one on the way back. And Bells was able to do that. They won 41-20, and that was obviously interesting because you find out, late. You get that game scheduled, probably late Thursday afternoon. I don't know how much planning, scheduling went into this game for either side. It was Breckenridge's homecoming. They just wanted somebody to play so they could, have the normal homecoming festivities. But Breckenridge was coming off a victory in their opener. So like I said, you need to know what that was gonna really look like. And Bells was able to get off to a 27-0 halftime lead. They were actually up 41-0 before Breckenridge scored 3 times in the fourth quarter after Bells had done all its scoring. They did it on the ground because that's what Bells does. They had 418 yards, and 413 of that, all but 5, was on the ground. Bo Baker led the way. He had 12 carries for 182 yards and 2 scores. He also returned the opening kickoff to the second half, 99 yards for a touchdown. Brock Baker added 10 carries for 102 yards and a touchdown. Grady Waldrop had 15 carries for 77 yards and a touchdown. Blake Rowland scored on the ground, and so that was that was basically a wrap for Bells. They did what they do. They bounced back. That was obviously that was going to be interesting to see. After losing in overtime to Whitesboro to start the season, they were able to go on the road, able to play, and so now they go to Valley View. Like I said, who's 0-1, trying to figure out what their deal is. Last year, Bells won this game 55-8, and we'll see if it more leans towards that or if Valley View can be a little more competitive. But I have a feeling, like I said, Bells does what they do. They're coming right for you, and if you can stop it, you can stop it. And honestly, Whitesboro didn't really stop it because Bell still ran for 400-something yards, but they were able to outscore them, and it's very tough to very few teams have been able to do that, and I don't know if Valley View necessarily has the firepower to be able to get that done, but that'll be a matchup at Valley View. Bell's going to Valley View on Friday night. A couple more games left here. We will touch on the 2A schools at this point. First one we're going to talk about is Tioga. They are going to Era. This is 1-1 Tioga against 0-2 Era. Tioga won last week 56-0 against Electra, and Era is coming off a 60-24 loss against Munster Sacred Heart. Obviously, for Tioga, big win last week. Scored a ton of points. Got a shutout. It's the first win for Chad Rogers after he moved over there from Denison. It matched Tioga's win total from last year when they only had one victory, and ironically enough, the one victory last year was against Era, so there's a chance that Tioga can win 2 in a row. They won this game convincingly last year, 39-8. Era has lost 24 of its last 25 games, so that's a promising sign for a team in the Bulldogs that started off with a 28-21 road loss against a good Petrolia team that beat up on Tioga last year. That game was obviously one possession game, and then Tioga in a game against a team that they lost to last year in Electra turned around and just rolled up big numbers. They had 3 guys rush for at least 100 yards. They finished with 527 yards rushing. had almost 600 yards of offense. They didn't really need to pass. Chase Evans led the way. He had 17 carries for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns. Logan Westbrook had 15 carries for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he was also 5 of 7 passing for 59 yards with a touchdown pass. And Johnny Dorpinghouse had 15 carries for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also caught the touchdown pass, led the way in receiving with 3 catches for 46 yards. So that's improvement. It's obviously better through 2 games for Tioga last year. You have a chance right now to go up 2-1, and you can sit there and legitimately say, hey, we're a couple plays away from being 3-0. So seeing stuff like this with district play coming up, Tioga might make somebody's life miserable in that district, and they may sneak up and bite somebody that doesn't think they're going to lose to Tioga after the way things played out last year. But it's obviously shown so far. It is a new season at Tioga, and they are taking full advantage of that with a big win last week and a chance to put together a winning streak at the 11-man level, which they since they moved up, they had played 30 coming into the season. They had played 30 games as an 11-man team, and they had only won 5 of them. So we're talking about you could have 2 wins in consecutive weeks compared to 5 wins in the first 3 years as an 11-man program. So things are headed in the right direction as Tioga visits Era on Friday night. Next up, Collinsville is going to go to McKinney Christian. This game's going to be at Ron Poe Stadium for those going down to McKinney. It's 0-2 Collinsville against 0-1 McKinney Christian. Collinsville's coming off a 47-14 loss against Cooper, and McKinney Christian lost 57-33 against Brentwood Christian. They did not play the first week. It got canceled. I don't know who canceled it. I just know it got canceled. So I'm assuming that meant their opponent, because McKinney Christian is playing this week. They played last week. So obviously I would imagine that they're back and healthy if that's the case. So but Collinsville, like I said, is off to the 0-2 start. They haven't been 0-3 since 2014, so they're trying to figure that out. This is a game that did not get played last year because of the staggered TAPS UIL deal, and so Collinsville played Peaster last year in this week, and so I don't know what to expect. We can't really compare scores or anything to last year. We don't know who won, who didn't win, that sort of thing. And Collinsville is I guess scuffling offensively is probably the best way to look at it. I mean, the offense probably isn't in a real great spot as we talk about that, but because they are they're playing a team that you would think they would have a pretty good shot against. They do have they went with multiple quarterbacks in the first game. The loss to Blue Ridge. Logan Jenkins got a majority of the snaps and the action there. He completed 11 of 19 passes for 167 yards and a touchdown with an interception. Nathan Bocanegra had the touchdown catch. He had 2 catches for 57 yards. Garrett Trevino had 4 carries for 54 yards and the other touchdown. But Cooper just really dominated on the ground. That's how they took care of business in this one. And so that's going to be interesting to see for a team that I said that it's been a little bit of both. Blue Ridge beat Collinsville with through the air. That was how they won the opener over the Pirates, and then Cooper, which is sort of expected because it's like we mentioned, they have that gunner background, that running attack sort of a deal. Ran for almost 400 yards against them last week. and I think all but one of the touchdowns was on the ground. So Collinsville's seen it both ways. They had a team beat them through the air. Last week it was beat them on the ground. So you can't really, I don't know if you can necessarily focus on one area or the other to help you get a win this week, but we'll see what McKinney Christian has to offer as Collinsville travels down to McKinney to take on them at Ron Post Stadium. In the last 2A game, like I said, hopefully it gets played. We may not know till the middle of the week, if not later. Tom Bean is scheduled to go to Clarksville. Tom Bean obviously 0-1. They didn't play last week because of the shutdown in the ISD. Clarksville is 1-1. We mentioned when we talked about Whitewright, they lost 49-0 against Whitewright, and then they bounced back last week with a 26-20 overtime win over Linden Kildare. This was a game last year that Tom Bean won. It was a close one last year, 18-12. Of course, they had played 2 games, and were trying to. Now both of those were losses, and they bounced back, so it may not make a difference. We'll see. Like I said, if this game gets played, if they were able to practice as normal, I would imagine that they were in the process of doing that. So the last week's game was canceled on Thursday, so you would imagine that they had gone through a normal sort of Monday up to Thursday schedule to get ready for this week. So for last week in a game that didn't happen, and they played a close game like we mentioned last week. In their opener against Morton, they went a long way to play that game. They came up short, 26-22. So we'll see. If this game gets played, I think it's an even matchup, and hopefully it does get played. So we'll see what happens if Tom Bean gets to go to Clarksville this week. And the last game on the list, we have Texoma Christian is hosting Denton Cavalry on their field at the school. Both teams are 0-2, so somebody's going to be happy after Friday. Cavalry's coming off a 46-0 loss against Wiley Prep, and Texoma Christian lost 56-13 against Ovia Christian. Last week at this time, TCS played Grayson Christian, so these teams have not played. So of course there is that aspect of it. You don't really know what you're getting into. Denton Cavalry, obviously, they're coming off a shutout loss. They only scored twice in the first game, so that's something to watch for. Sort of the same thing with TCS. They've been having a little bit of trouble scoring. They haven't been able to put up any sort of big number yet. Coming off a game last week with only 13 points. Hayden Turner has kind of really carried the offense in terms of touchdowns and stuff at the quarterback spot. He had both touchdowns last week, and so that's obviously something to watch. Can they get some more guys involved? Can they kind of be a little more consistent when it comes to their offensive game plan and try not to fall behind? It was 36-13 at halftime. TCS scored both their touchdowns in the second quarter to kind of get back in it a little bit, but they just they couldn't get anything going in the passing game, and then running the ball, it just wasn't really clicking. So gonna be interesting to see. Like I said, somebody's gonna win this game. It's at TCS's home field, so that could be good for them. So we'll see what happens as Texoma Christian hosts Denton Cavalry on Friday night. So that is the game schedule for this week. Hopefully everybody's back to normal. Hopefully we get all the games in, and then we will be officially at the point where some teams will be in district play, some teams will be on their bye week with non-district behind them, and district play ready to begin in week 5. So always stuff happening, always exciting stuff going on for our teams. If you're a Gunner fan, a Denison fan, a Ben Alstein fan, you're feeling pretty good. You haven't lost yet, which 2-0 is 2-0, and then we had several teams bounce back in big ways. Sherman with a Hail Mary, Tioga with just a flat blowout. Bell's in the same boat. Just kind of get back on track for a team that has high expectations. And then we've got some teams that have some questions going into the Week 3 games as well. But there's always something to talk about. I appreciate you tuning in, and enjoy your times at the games. Hopefully this is the last week where we've got hot temperatures. We can actually get some fall weather going, and we'll talk to you next week.